Can you believe it? We're back again. I mean,
It's like three in rapid succession.
well, for us, it's rapid succession, but for them, it's one a month for 3 months because we're going to
Right
kind of
on.
spread it out a little bit. Don't call it a comeback. Don't,
Don't call it.
don't, don't. How you doing this fine afternoon, Tony? Well, evening now, I suppose. Yes, very much.
Yes, evening now. Doing well. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous day here in Denver.
Yeah, happy to have your house back to yourself.
Well, I mean, like, let's see. Ash was here, then my parents. Then it was like 2.5 weeks of people in my house, and that's good. It's also good to end.
Yes, just as much as it's nice to be someplace new and be away, there's something about sleeping in your own bed that's just glorious.
Totally.
So, as much as you're happy to be rid of us, we're happy to be home. So,
I'm sure Gus is thrilled too.
yeah, my cat is been a little starved for attention, no doubt, no doubt. But, kind of continuing on the last conversation with SJ, where we both got to play it at tracks. Another thing we got to do was hang out with Ian Wilson. Like, if you would have told me that we would have been able to play a game with a gentleman from England flying over to the center of the United States, I would have laughed at you. I mean, Jeroen, he's going to come no matter what. Like,
Yeah.
he makes the trip, but I was pleasantly surprised that Ian made the trip all the way over to your little convention. It was
Well, he made a trip of it, right? He stayed several days after and toured Rocky Mountain National Park. He did a couple Colorado things.
nice.
So that's the way to do it, right? If you're going to make that long journey, hang out a little bit, do a couple of things, taste the local culture, if you will, and then go back. So I hope he had a good time.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like he did. He was there primarily to play 18BF, which is what we're going to talk about here in a minute or two. But while he was there, we kind of started a new PAX tradition, or new PAX. Wow, wow! Tell me what I've been doing for the last 2 days straight, digging out
Oh,
emails.
there is an axe on the end of PAX, just like
There is,
tracks.
there is. I apologize. New tracks tradition, and that is getting the designers to sign the box of your copy. So you'll have lots of little presents to find as I make designers mark up your copies of games, which I think is kind of funny and great at the exact
Oh,
same time.
did you do that? Okay, I'll have to go look at my
Well, the
my
best part
Ian
was
Wilson games.
is I grabbed 6167 off the shelf, the new print, and asked him to sign that in the inside. And then he just went and started pulling his boxes off the shelf and doing other ones.
I
So,
had no idea. That is really cool.
yep.
I am going to the basement. I'll be right back. No, I'll do it after this.
That's 2 flights. You don't want to do that.
No, no.
And then we also got Cancun to sign his copy of PNW for you as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, every time I asked you for a Sharpie, that's what I was doing. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thank you, Chris.
you are welcome. You are welcome. Another cool thing that kind of came out, it just popped up today, was Justin Bell of Meeple Mountain did a little
Yeah.
write up on the little convention that could see what I
18
did there.
things about tracks. I thought that was a clever title.
Yeah, it was. It was.
18.
It was a very interesting piece. I really enjoyed reading it, and I highly recommend our readers check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's an interesting take from somebody who hasn't done a small convention, let alone a train only convention, which,
Yeah.
I'm sure for a lot of our listeners, that's kind of daunting. Like 4 days of train games, 4.5, by the way.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. It's daunting. It's a long way to spend those a lot of days, but I would also argue Denver has a lot to offer. So if you
Yeah.
feel trapped and confined inside a hotel, there's plenty of stuff to do very nearby. You can get to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal is great. Great place to go blow a couple hours outdoors
Good,
outside.
good buffalo watching. But
Buffalo watching. We felt we saw
one
bald
key
eagles. Yeah,
we did. One key takeaway from Justin's article was he's coming back next year. So yes,
exactly. Exactly. And your love of Costco. So
that's right.
I'm guilty of making that happen, by the way. I think it's hysterical.
Yes.
But so it was definitely a cool time. If you're on the fence, I highly recommend giving it a try. It's one of those things that, Denver's a great hub. You can get there cheap. You can get to a convention, have some fun, hang out with friends of like-minded 18xx individuals, and spend hours and hours playing a game. And I think
Tomorrow, I'm
yeah,
going to sign the contract. It'll be in Denver, May 1, 2, 3, and 4.
okay.
So if you're interested in coming to the tracks, and it is a small attendance footprint. There's only 60 tickets available due to the space. So if you're interested in coming to the tracks and you're not on our mailing list, write Chris. He'll get you on our list, and or you can email me at info@tracks-denver.com.
And that's two X's in tracks.
2 X's.
I wonder where you got that from.
Ah,
No idea. But speaking of long games, the longest game
yes.
I played by far, hands down, was 18BF, which stands for Big Four, which is Ian Wilson's newest prototype. I say prototype, I'm going to put that in air quotes because I think it's pretty much about somebody's about to sign for artwork and hit print soon on this. So keep your eye out on the internet for whoever that may be. It likely could be a Kickstarter. Maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. So definitely keep your eye out for that as we talk about it. It's so it's coming. It's not here yet. But a lot of what we're going to talk about, especially if you're fans of 61, 67, will definitely you'll understand. Especially if you want the big game set in England, but maybe 22 isn't quite your jam. I think that, this is definitely worth a listen. There's a lot of ground to cover. This is not going to be a 35-minute SJ episode for sure. So
Right.
strap in, and let's
Hopefully
get
not
started.
too much longer.
No, we're gonna try and
my
keep
cocktail won't last that long. So
Yeah, we'll take a cocktail break mid run. So we're still waiting on the publisher. It is a prototype we played, so things we may talk about could possibly change by the time the game finally sees production. Although he's been playing the same prototype for quite some time,
Yeah.
so
I saw on BGG where he announced, and I don't know when that was, that the design is finished.
yeah, it's pretty buttoned down. And aside from maybe a little thing here or there, or a little graphical change here and there, I don't think you're going to see much different than we're going to talk about. It is a longer game. It plays 3 to 5 people, and it will take you 5 hours. I
least.
think, 61. That's a good solid 3 pushing 4 hour game if you play it from zero without the starting kits and everything. And then this basically does that, adds a lot more track building, which kind of slows it down a little bit. And then also has a whole extra rank of trains almost, and extra set of company layers that you get involved, because it's got more trains, more layers, and it just kind of, the end kind of balloons out a little bit bigger. It doesn't just kind of go, stop, here's how we go. So cool. So Tony, what do we think? Does this obviously it's not going to, there's my trying to find my buttons. This doesn't really compare to 1830. This is not a 30 base game. 61 is pretty much its own beast. I think we could argue it's kind of its own grandfather of a category, with the way companies merge and come together and do all that. I think that it's pretty much its own animal. So in our comparisons to 61, what do you think kind of sets this guy apart?
Um, I don't know, a couple of things, right? Like there's no nationalization like there is in 61. So, I mean, this game is 61 core with some extra different things going on, right? And so,
Right.
and one of those extra different things that isn't going on is nationalization. So that definitely sets it apart. Um, the number of miners, there's 24 miners
Yeah.
in the game. So, it's a larger footprint game to go with that larger footprint map. And the trains are a little bit different. We'll talk about it more in trains, of course, but the trains start out the same as 61, but then they're different at the end. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that I was happy for, because I use it a lot, but I'm not very good at it, is the loan system of 61 is
Mhm.
exactly the same as you recall.
Yeah.
The difference being that now we have these systems that can own majors, and more on that in a bit. They can have more loans because they're bigger and they can absorb more. So you kind of have that extra level, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And that is, another thing that differentiates this game, right? Because in 61, miners form the public companies. And in this game, that's still true, but public companies can form systems. And of course, there is another difference in the company acquisition type stuff from 61, where public companies can acquire minor companies, not through a merger process, but through an
They can
acquisition
just gobble
process.
them up.
Yeah. All
Right.
friendly acquisitions, of course. They call them takeovers in this game, but they're friendly. They're more of an acquisition.
Right. Right. There's no voting or anything like that involved.
Ah.
Figuring out your value is pretty interesting. I think, how you figure out your minor value is pretty straightforward, right? Add them together, divide by 2, and then round down. Boom, got your value. The systems add them together and then back up 3 spaces, as I recall.
Okay.
So it's slightly different when they merged, their value became a different thing. For instance, I was kind of gaming my share price a little bit because I was going to lose too much value if I went in, because my companies were next to each other, so they'd both be the lower value. So I held off one round and then spaced them out so I got a better value for it. It's like, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. And I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be worth it or not. I came in a good second, but at the end of the day, but yeah, it was just one of those things where I had too many shares of both companies. And I'm like, I just don't want to lose like $250, $300 in value in one shot. So we'll see. We'll see. So I thought it was pretty cool. There are a couple ferry companies which kind of bolster little ports around the island of Great Britain there. So you get to, it encourages you to run to maybe some ports you may not otherwise want to run, like the Irish Sea, the lower left-hand corner down there. There's some other ports up north. They're just like little money generators, an extra little 10 ping going off a port, which, especially early in the game, can help out. I thought they were cool. And then some of the Underground Railroads would pop up as miners later in the auction rounds. The tube, which was pretty cool because what it did was it kind of gave you something to do with cash you might had laying around at the end of a stock round, because let's face it, the value of these things got pretty expensive, especially late in the game. So if you had $150 laying around, you were doing nothing with it because, you couldn't buy a share with it and it wasn't much. So they kind of gave you something to do with that money because some ferries may be still around and there may be some of those miners kicking around.
Well, one thing that's kind of cool, right, is you start the game, there's 10 private companies, only 7 are in play at any one time. You auction those off, and then the game starts, right? And then the ferry companies and the Underground Railroads come out later in the game, well, the ferry companies are available right away, stuff like that. But
Right.
like the point is, there are private companies available beyond the first stock round, including late in the game with the undergrounds. And so,
Right.
one thing that lets you do is get a little more money out of your company later in the game when you sell them those late
True.
profits too. Yeah.
No, that's it's a great point. So I'm thinking getting money out of my pocket. You're thinking about getting it back.
I want it out of the company's pocket.
Yep. Cool. The train roster, aside from a couple we'll talk about when we get on later in the green phase, is pretty much the same. There are a couple additions later in the game that kind of help speed things up, and you have a lot of track, and systems can have a lot of trains. So he has some interesting ways to handle that we'll clue you into.
Yeah.
I thought were cool.
Cool.
Right on. So let's hop over into the yellow phase. So the yellow phase, we're going to talk about the map and the stock market. Stock market.
You thought Russia was big.
Yeah.
I'm laughing at your comment there.
Yeah, so my lower third says, you thought Russia was big, for those of you playing along at home. It is. It's a pretty big map. I would say probably 25 to 40% bigger than Russia is, because it's got some width to it. It feels longer. It's substantial. You're laying a lot of track.
Oh, it's big. I didn't feel it was that much bigger, but it's bigger.
For sure. Did you play around in the north at all? Like, where did you end up
I
playing?
did.
Okay.
I played in the north and along England's west coast,
Okay.
and into London, or excuse me, east coast.
Yeah, anybody who's familiar with the London 1822 map, I mean, you kind of have a similar problem in that revenue centers seem to follow that western coast a lot more than they follow the eastern coast. And that makes sense. That's historically accurate. And we definitely learned from our chats with Ian that he cares a lot about the history of these games. So,
Oh, yes, immensely.
absolutely. So you're not going to see anything crazy, like, I don't know, opium in the middle of London. Oh wait, that's there too, I'm sure. But in any event,
Chris, what's in that drink, sir?
yeah, it's the last one. That's what's in that one.
Well,
The market,
look, you
those
mentioned London. Let's talk about London, right? Because, like you said, it's an important monetary center. So it's kind of like the Moscow 61 vibes, but it's not in the middle of the map, right? It's tucked over here where London is.
it's doubled.
So, and there's so many miners that start there, right? Like each of the points has two token locations available and everything. And one thing that's cool about that is through mergers and takeovers, you can end up with a company having more than one station in London.
Yeah.
So that could be pretty cool.
And unlike other games that may feature a big hub like that, and even 61 for that matter, you cannot run to London unless you have a token in London.
Yes.
So you can't just dead end London every single time and get bank. It's like, nope, you better have a company in London. The other thing is you can sometimes, and I saw this happen. I think it actually happened to Justin, as a matter of fact. He got two companies in London, merged them together, and had two tokens in the same hole. They share a piece of track coming out that hex side.
Yeah.
So he could only operate one of those tokens at any given time because he can only use the track once. And there's no reason not to do that. Like, so if you're trying to token London, you need to want to space them out sometimes to try and get as many entry and exit points. Yeah. He literally has a large sub hex that's drawn off to the side. And I can't imagine you could do it any other way.
Yeah.
Because it's got 16 tokens in it. It's a monster. It's a beast.
Yeah, it's like this big.
No, 12. It would be 12. Yeah. Like I said, I applaud 22 for the price drum and I wish more games would do that. Looking at you, 1880. I love the idea of just upgrading the tile by changing the drum because it just makes the logistical life a lot easier. This takes it to the next level and says, no, you need a whole nother map to do this on. London's
We have a
its
separate
own thing.
hexagon.
I can see like an expansion where there's like some weird curvy lines in there. But again, very historically accurate. And why he did that was based a lot on the history of London and the trains that ran in there, which was very interesting. So London's cool. We like the map. Let's see. It's a good size. I think you compared it to 22 in scope and scale. We play with large tiles, but I think at the end of the day, it felt as big as 22 does as far as the size and scope of that goes. So I totally agree with that.
Cool.
So
Stock market was tame, right? As it is in
Mhm.
61, right? Ian develops operational games, right? I did like that it was 2D rather than the 3D that's really 2D, but and it did have an interesting feature in this game that is not in 61, right? And that is you can actually close a company. There's a closed box at the end of the stock market.
right.
And I mean, I had one play at Drax. It didn't happen in our game, but I mean, I guess I can imagine that you can let a company close, start a cheap something or other out, move the money off, let it close. I mean, maybe that's helpful in some situations. But like the key part of that though is trains are not required in this game. You can, right? You take loans, buy your trains like normal, but you don't have to. Trains are not required. And if you're, let me say that a little bit differently because his rules are a little bit different there. A train is required if you can afford one,
Right.
but if you cannot afford one, then you will be trainless, and you move back an extra space. There we go. Let's say that more correctly.
Right. So you move back one
so
for
you
not
can-
having a route, and you move back another one
Right.
for not having a trade.
Yeah.
So
So-
there might be times when
Ah,
you don't want to merge that
It's a-
company in because it's a dog. It's not like it's getting gobbled by a national, because now it's going to hold back your major. So now you have the option to just close it instead.
sure.
So, but I like to run good companies, so don't look to me to do that. Not likely. Not likely. Cool. So, anything else on the map or anything else on the stock market? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it gets pretty expensive and things like that higher up, but other than that, fun.
Cool.
Cool.
Let's talk about choo-choo trains.
Let's talk about choo-choos. So that's going to bring us to the green phase. In the green phase, we definitely like to run trains. And oh boy, are there trains.
Yeah. And you would expect there to be more trains of each count, given
Sure.
the expanded number of companies.
So I think this is kind of a good time to kind of bring up, the role of a system as far as how, like we've talked about how it forms, but when does it form? It can definitely form once you have two companies, you hit a merger round, you can form them. So it's pretty much any time. But typically we didn't see them form, or at least I'm sorry, I didn't see them form until we were pushing gray. So like almost the end of the game, we're coming in on the home stretch, and that's kind of when they came together. I believe you could do it sooner. But I also think there's a point where, you kind of want to maximize your companies and get them lined up so that when you bring them together, that they're going to be the most effective big company you can be, which again, pretty cool. It's a nice mechanic, but it also means that you are running potentially 4 trains at the end of the game over 2 large merger companies. So that can be a little nuts trying to calculate all that, especially if you merged companies that are together, and shared a lot of the same track and homes and things like that. we didn't talk about it in the maps, but your revenue centers, your big revenue centers, the Birmingham, the Manchester are still also two keys in that, as well as Liverpool. They're kind of your three big homes there. So why do you care about having all those tokens? Well, that's because he's brought in these G trains. And what's really cool about the G trains is that they will count one of your tokens for each number of the train. And if you have multiple, like let's say you have three 3Gs, then you need to have 6 unique tokens to properly run that train. You can't double. It's not 3 doubled. So that means like now you might be counting, oh, I got a 60, a 60, and a 50. Well, now you might be counting a 20, a 30, and another 30. So you kind of have to make sure you're getting tokens out, and make sure that you're maximizing all that. So when you get G trains, you can really pop it. And if you have those 3 lovely tokens in London, you're only counting 1. So there is that. So how he chose to do the G trains, it's glorious for end of run math. I absolutely love it because it doesn't matter who hits it. Just count your centers. You're done. But then we also have normal trains that he does on top of that are some of the big boys.
Well, let's not get off the G trains.
You want to stay on the G train? Let's stay on the G train. I do, because
I don't like them. Yeah, so a 3G is like having 3 little 1 trains, right? So they don't run any track. They just serve stations. They don't run track. They don't, you don't have to have routes to them, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And the G trains come out later, right? They're permanent. They're in the permanent ranks. Yeah. And they're cheaper to buy than the bigger trains. And,
a little bit, about 10% on average, as I recall.
I honestly feel like it detracts from the operational nature of the game, because now that I have laid my track and built my stations and clogged up your routes, Chris, you can just buy these G trains and cheat. Okay, there you go.
And if I could touch it and get a token in there, I get full credit for that. All that work. I
totally understand why they're there. And in his design notes, he says the introduction of G trains makes running 4 trains in a system more practical.
Right.
And I don't like them. I mean, I think it detracts from the operational nature.
Interesting. And I like the fact that it speeds up the end of the game, where I totally understand, because even if you get tokened out of that city,
all it speeds up is your counting.
Yes.
All it speeds up is your counting. That's it. It doesn't speed up anything else.
It does a little bit of track laying, because you're not trying to just build bypass after bypass after bypass.
Hey, if you're running 4 G trains, you don't even need to build any track, right?
There you go.
Just upgrade. Yeah. No thanks.
But you'll only the max tokens a company can have is going to be, I want to say 18. And then no, I'm sorry. It's 8 for if you merge 2 majors into a system, you'll have 8 tokens. If you manage to get a third in there, you can get a 12 token company. So the most you'd ever run of the G's is a N number, and that's assuming you don't have duplicates.
And the cheaper nature just, also alleviated some train pressure.
Sure.
The cheaper nature of the G trains, right? So not a fan of the G trains. I'll tell you what I am a fan of, though, is how he did change the rest of his train deck.
All right.
Because there are no 7 and 8 ranges, right? There are 7 and 8 trains, which are, potentially hard to run with all those tokens running around out there.
Sure.
And yes, Chris, you got to count 8 stops, instead of the 4G. But instead, he's got like 3 + 3s and 4 + 4s, which are 3 trains doubled and 4 trains doubled and stuff like that. So you can just run shorter routes, double them up. I didn't mind that too bad. It definitely makes, running 4 trains a bit more practical there too with the systems.
Yeah. But I think it's also kind of like, and I definitely feel this in Russia sometimes. If you don't have a token, you don't have a route, right? Like you need to have your route locked. And if you don't, you're not going to be able to run it, because somebody's going to drop a token in your front door or smack in the middle of your lawn at some point or another. So this is very similar in that, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. So the systems are also, you get like 40% off the bat. Oh,
Whoa.
whoa.
Let's
Oh,
go.
whoa. Sorry. Off in the notes.
Let's
I was stuck
if
on
we're gonna talk
systems.
if
We'll
we're
get
gonna
there.
talk systems, let's go Brown. Let's russet it.
You want to rush it? Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything we need to cover on that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
3 trains are still important, just like they are in 61. And
Yeah. So like,
$135 in 2 loans gets you a 3 train.
let's
I
push
love
the
all
brown
that
out.
stuff. You got it.
So what I was starting to say before I got ahead of myself is, we talked a little bit about systems and how they form. And let's be honest, it's one of the biggest changes to this game system of Ian's is the system that's in the operations. You get 40%. Everything else is a 5% share. So yeah, for those of you who don't like math, Rails on Board can now go ahead and make another chart that shows you payments up to 20. I don't know how small that would have to be, but it would be a little bit of a nightmare. It's not horrible. You get used to it very quickly.
Yeah, it's easy.
I get stymied by 20% share, so this was my nightmare. But it's okay. It's a me problem, not a you problem. By any means, unless you're sitting at the table, then watch me like a hawk because I'm either screwing my payments out or yours. So pay attention. And especially late in the game. But I think it's one of the single best features of the entire game because, we saw somebody take a full company in and then somebody who basically made a little major, as it were, with only one minor in it and then merge that in together. So I kind of like how he's kind of accounted for a couple different types of families to kind of come into the system fold, which I think is pretty cool. It was definitely, I kind of felt like next time I might want to do it earlier because it felt like it was such a fun lever that you don't get to use very long. Right? Because you're really only kind of using it right at the end to kind of speed up the end game in that process. But I kind of wanted to play with this system a little bit more. So I think if I were to play it again, I would want to try and do that a lot earlier.
Okay.
And that's also, cool. I believe when you convert to a system, that shares are not available for other players. So when you do it in the merger round, yeah. So when you do it in the merger round and you grow up, normally when you grow up miners, especially if you do it in the first set, right? Like you're able to probably sell a couple shares to other people to generate a little extra capital because they want paying shares. They know it's going to operate once. So it's a good investment typically. You only get a chance to buy one. Nobody's dumping anything on you. So it's a nice way to kind of boost the company real quick, especially if your timing's better than everybody else. And mine was good that every time I did it, two people were buying my shares because I always did it when they have money and opportunity. The systems, on the other hand, don't get that little bump. So when you go to make a system, you kind of have to be ready to go out of the gate. And I don't even believe the director gets a chance at buying shares in the merger round either. I don't think. I'd have to double check that. I think you just get your converted shares.
Yeah.
But
one little shenanigan related to the converted shares is that we mentioned that major companies, public companies, can do takeovers, friendly takeovers.
Right.
And in so doing, you can exceed 60% ownership. So if you're really a fan of your company that you're running and you want to own more than 60% and then turn that into a system.
Right.
It's a neat little shenanigan because a single public company can convert to a system or two can merge.
Right.
So there's some opportunities there.
Yeah. And the fact that you can merge early and then you can kind of bring one up later and gobble it in.
No, once you're a system, you're done with
Nope. Not
takeovers and
there.
acquisitions. Yeah. So you want to, set the plate, set the table before you do your thing.
Thus,
But I
again,
think the
making it
systems,
kind of making it more of a late game shenanigan because you kind of have to have
yeah,
everything set up before you do this, right?
yeah. And I think they're, hey, one whole play here, but they seem like it's important to your success in the game too, is creating the systems because only they can run the big trains like the 5+5 trains,
Right.
and you can run 4 trains. Yes, it's a 5% share, but you still have the same percentage as you had in the companies going in, so um, I think they're really important, and you get a lot of stations. It's great for those G trains, Chris.
Love for the G.
If you're a fan of 61, those major companies, you get 3 stations. They're precious few to go around, right? And so, like, it just feels luxurious having this big system with all these stations everywhere. It's
Yeah,
great.
it's I like how it handles it. It, like I said, for me it's almost like a little too end gamey. I'd like to play around with that a little bit more. But also, you know, this is such a big game that Ian kind of had to explain it to us in stages as they broke throughout the game. So while I love that method of teaching, it's also one of those that kind of holds you back a little bit and you might make some suboptimal decisions as a result.
Sure.
So it's one of those things you just kind of have to, know that maybe your first time, you're really going to learn some stuff, right? Like you're going to learn about having two tokens, or having two companies in Birmingham might sound great. If you've ever been to Birmingham, it doesn't. But it's one of those that later that not having that one token back will hurt you, right? So it's, if you lay good tokens and you're smart about it as you go through, I think it'll serve you better when you hit system time at the end. I also don't know. I think 22, you can make the argument that miners can last the whole game. I did it when we played MRS. I got a nice big fat, train in my miner and ran at the end very well. I don't know if I can make the same argument here. Like, I think you need to have a system at the end if you even want to be competitive. The share price just bounds so far ahead, and you're able to really generate revenue like nobody's business. Where I just don't feel, even if you had the equivalent amount of miners, that it would do that.
Yeah, I think they're important.
Absolutely, and it should be for the game's biggest MacGuffin, right?
You would hope. Yeah.
MacGuffin, the crime dog. Uh,
Oh, wow.
new slogan coming up. All right. So I think you've kind of heard, throughout this, but let's hop into the gray phase and
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the feelings. Cause, I don't think by any means, whenever you play a really long, large game, I feel like there's going to be some point that somebody's going to rub up against. I think, you can't make something that big and that long without having a nit here or a niggle there or an imperfection, something that's kind of rubs you the wrong way. What do you've talked about one of them with the G trains, Tony. Do you have anything else?
Um, no, no. My feels are that I like this game. And
Okay.
if you like 61, you'll probably find something to like about this game because, hello, mergers. I love merger games. This has one
If
more
you
layer
haven't
of
heard.
mergers. Right. So it's a bigger, longer 61 with additional mergers and a few other MacGuffins thrown in, and it's a very good game, and it is also a solid operational game, right? Like there's
Right.
not any stock market tricks or anything like that. This is about building good companies, doing mergers, growing, keeping the money and the trains flowing. So um, like there wasn't any train danger that I felt in my one game. Um, it's just like I said about the running good companies over the long haul. It's a longer haul that
Really
we're
is.
doing this, right? And freeing yourself of potential liabilities by doing the merger. Because even though you might not end up having to buy a train, that's obviously not optimal for a company
No.
to start sliding down the market, right? Um, it's managing those liabilities without too much impact on your wealth at the end of the game. So, and maybe even like with the systems, add to your wealth during the game. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I like the game. Um, how do I say this? It's not a strong love or anything like that. Like I like 61 better still. I'm only one game in. Um, yeah, I'm considering making a print and play of it. The files are available. It's a good game. It works 100%. Just not sure if I really want to, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's funny because you know, my if I have any niggles, they kind of come around the time. Now, I mean, this is kind of, even Ian said it's kind of meant to be like 25 to 50% bigger than 61. Like that was the goal of this game. He has achieved that goal in both scope of the map, scope of the companies, and everything else. I think he nailed it perfectly. You kind of said you saw no train danger. I didn't either, but I think that's also a function of the loans, right? Like I think, people aren't trying to manufacture to go into nationals. So I think,
Uh, yeah,
you
but
know,
there weren't a lot of loans taken either, right?
oh,
Like that
okay.
train pressure would cause loans,
Yeah,
so
we had a couple. We didn't have too many. But it was like you say, it was kind of noticeable. Like I didn't have to worry. I wasn't ever really stressed about trains aside from that whole, 2 to 3 conversion when you're buying the miners when the threes pop and you don't have quite enough money. That's about the only time it gets a little like just make sure you have 235 in your company so you can take 2 loans so you can buy the train and get out of it with no problem. That all lives very much there.
yeah.
But I do feel I don't want to say I think runaway leader is used way too much in games in general, but I do feel that diagram that wedge can get farther and farther away of somebody who's very good at operational games. Because you are playing longer. So if they had a lead going into Brown, that lead's just going to continue to take off. So, if you're one of those people who needs to win every game, there's no stock levers to pull to hurt them. There's nothing you can do. You can token to an extent, but G trains, like you discussed, kind of don't hold that back. So I kind of feel like there isn't really a lever to catch the leader or to kind of
Yeah.
rein them in and pull them back. You really have to be doing that earlier in the game by the time you've realized that it was too late, right? Next thing you know, they're running these monster systems and going away. So if you're one of those people who needs to win every game, you need to have ways to kind of get back in it at any given point. It might be a little rougher for you, not gonna lie. Especially on a 4, 5, 6 hour game with the teach, it's going to be a long one. You're going to be sitting there for a while.
Yeah. The time wasn't an issue for me,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, we were also 4 days of vacation, of train gaming. That was your first.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a little different for somebody who's planning like a Saturday of gaming, right? But I also feel the exact same way about 1817. I feel like whoever kind of can get out to an early lead, can really run away. But there are levers there that you can pull to kind of help try to rein them back, right? A little bit or make it riskier for them and things like that, where that doesn't exist here. So I have a feeling that may frustrate some people. I am not one of them, but I was also in the hunt most of the game. At least, I'm playing for second usually when I play because, the people I play against are just too good. So there's that. Awesome.
right on, right on.
So we both enjoyed it. at a bare minimum, but we also both like 61, 67 a lot. You know, I really enjoy it, and I like the addition of systems. I think it's a lot of fun when you can, you know, kind of keep merging things together and making this big animal. Like, I don't think I've played with a system outside of Coast to Coast, if I'm honest. So it's kind of cool to really see it work on paper, as it were, because my Coast to Coast game wasn't on paper. So it was kind of fun to watch.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Not available in the Trax library, by the way.
No, I mean, I don't know if it ever will be.
You
Can you
need a
even
lot
get
more
it?
table space for that thing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
A lot
guys,
more than
can't
4
afford the
days.
table space. Not going to buy it.
That's right.
Fair enough. Awesome. So there you have it. That's 18 Big Four / BF coming soonish from someone at some point. So, you know, if anybody wants to chime in, if they know stuff, feel free. But it's not really our place to disclose that because it's not public knowledge. So we will keep that to ourselves. Thank you very much. But let's put it this way. We're okay with it. It'll be wherever it lands, it's in good hands. That's for sure. How's that? Is that ambiguous enough? I think I can leave
Sure.
it at that. Absolutely. So, Tony, I mean, we have a couple games in England now. So what would you think would be your priority deal marker for this guy?
Well, I do happen to have. Oh man, I should have grabbed it and brought it up here. But I have a cast iron British phone booth.
You do?
Yes. I wonder where I got that.
I don't know. No idea.
That
Probably
would be
Amazon.
good for this game.
I think it should be
I
like a
think
transform.
you got it from Amazon.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I think if you could take like two trains and like merge them into one, like a transformer, I think that would be the ideal one, right? Or a
Thomas.
train with a propeller, so it could just be a G train that just flies from city to city. I think you can't go wrong with the classics. You know, you got the LNR, you got the Lobster, you got all the companies that everybody is very familiar with between 62, 60, or 22, and then now this. So you all know what needs to be done. Why not just eat fish and chips and pass around the empty basket when you're done? I think that would work.
Oh. I will take some port wine, please, while we
There you go. But you'll eat the chips,
Yes, but not the fish.
not the fish. And that's fine.
No. Cooked or otherwise.
There you go. Fair enough. Excellent. Well, thank you, Tony. This was a good one. I'm really glad we got to talk. It was great to hang out with Ian. We had tried to sit down with Ian while we were out there, but he was just he was knackered. Both times we tried to sit, it was just not working out. So unfortunately, we just kind of grilled him a lot while we were playing to try and get some feedback and some thoughts, and
Yeah.
and try and convey them.
It feels kind of weird talking about a game that isn't available yet, but
Yeah.
it's a good one. So there.
And it's unlike, I like to think that when we talk about a game that hasn't been made yet, it's available. You can do the print and play if you desire. But also, I think it's important that we've played it, right? Like, I felt the same way about PNW because I'd played it with Ken before it was published and everything. So 18 India, obviously we played a bunch. So I think that there's a place for that, and we'll create a little buzz, and then, we'll see what happens.
A little something to be excited about for the however distant future.
So I think we have at least a couple more in my brain that we're going to talk about, and I think they fill the printed category nicely. So we'll see how they kind of fare and how our future goes.
I'm excited about the next one, actually. So
yeah, and you know what? I think the next one falls in the surprise category again, squarely for me.
Oh,
I
in terms
didn't,
of like when you got exposed to the game, it surprised you.
yeah, I didn't expect to like
Yeah,
it. I had some
gotcha.
preformed thoughts about it, and we went into it.
Interesting.
Kind of like SJ. I didn't expect much. I'm like, oh, string bean map, small game. You can kind
Yeah.
of,
Okay.
but then it surprised us both, I think.
Yeah, it's quite good.
The next one that we'll discuss did that same thing. Like, I'm like, oh, this is just a big gimmick, and they turned it into a game. Yeah, but sometimes the gimmick works, people.
That's right. The
So,
gears and Zolkin gimmick. Oh, they work. Yes.
so glorious. Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, we're going to let you go. We just clipped under an hour, so I'm very happy to report we hit our marks. We said under an hour, and here we are. So, with a few
Awesome.
minutes to spare to make a drink, I'm good. So,
Time to go sit on the patio. It's still 69 degrees here. So
sit on my deck, but there's nothing to do. Actually, it's pouring right now. That's not a good idea.
no. Right
Soggy
on.
bum, as it were. Excellent. Well, you all
Man,
have fun.
knackered and bum. You're bringing all the English Railroad vibes through here.
I borderline
Jolly good.
Anglophile. I love a lot. I just love the slang words that they have. I just think they're great.
It's pretty cool.
I think they're diamond, Tony. Diamond.
Diamond. We need an English to English dictionary.
There, one exists.
Yeah, sure.
Excellent.
Cool.
Well, you all take care. We will talk to you. I guess we'll have one out next month, but we'll see what happens. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. This Week and Each Week is brought to you by Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you next time.